Yeah, why don't we just start the podcast then?
Yeah,
Okay. Well, hello. How's it going, Richard?
I'm well. I'm well, Jason. How are you?
Uh, I'm pretty good. I'm pretty good. It's a stressful year, but it's a stressful year for been a few stressful years for everyone, I imagine.
Mm, I've just had a stressful month. This Kickstarter thing is making me insane.
So you're doing Magic Show. You've returned.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I'm doing a thing called Magic Show, and there's a Kickstarter for it, and that your audience can get to. Hopefully, it's I say at some point at magicshow.net. Magic with a
Okay.
K. Net.
What prompted it? What made you decide to stop doing Dangerous Minds and do this? I mean, I haven't caught up with you in like 10 years or something.
Well, Dangerous Minds wasn't making any money anymore. It
Okay.
was simple as that. I mean, just the bottom had fallen out of banner ads on the internet, and no one was making any money anymore unless they had subscriptions. And I don't think Dangerous Minds is the kind of thing that people would subscribe and pay for. So we just kind of mothballed it. And
Okay.
but the thing is, actually, it had lived on longer than the that drop in the banner ad market, because we had a deal with Vice where we were sort of
Mm.
sending them traffic from the Facebook page. But on the day of the pandemic, when shutting down the state of Ohio, which was the first day, that was the day that Vice said we're not going to renew the contract. And luckily, we had just gotten a new puppy before that email arrived, so it sort of made
Okay.
the go down a little bit more.
Yeah, that's
But
tense.
so I hadn't been doing that. That's been sort of like a hobby thing, not a business thing, for like the last almost 5 years.
So you've come back. You are doing Magic Show, which is a documentary with interviewing a bunch of magicians. You're kickstartering it for probably 8 more days after this goes up. And why did you decide to do it? And it's kind of after Dangerous Minds, which we talked about. But
Well, I was in Los Angeles for a wedding,
mhm.
and my friend Chris Holmes, who is a sort of a mad scientist type of guy who is has a very wide social circle. He's been Paul McCartney's DJ for the last like 20 years.
Okay, okay,
So he's been all around the world, and he can walk into any place and know a lot of people, and he's one of the best connected people I've ever met, and
okay.
and just a wild guy. And if your listeners want to check on that, they can go to his website, Fascinated by Everything, and see what he's doing. He's got these wild. You would love it, Jason. He's got these wild. It's like an like op art. It's almost like a lava lamp type of thing, but you put on goggles and you could look down and you could look up, and you're in this, like, it feels very weightless, but he'll use music like Radiohead. He's friends with Tom York,
Okay.
so he'll
Okay.
he'll be allowed to use Radiohead's music, and then you'll hear Alan Watts or Timothy Leary or Krishnamurti or some sort of spiritual leader, like, talking over this sort of soundscapes that he makes himself also. And then these things are also, they're put into spheres, like the Sphere in Las Vegas. There's a new place that just opened in Los Angeles. It's a similar thing where there's just like a dome of this, and people walk in, and it's like an art project. But he
Nice.
does
Okay.
that stuff, right? He's just this really wild guy. And he said so I'm in LA for a wedding, and he says, let's go out to lunch. And he said, look, we should do a magic show, a show about magic together. Do you want to do that? And I'm like, yeah. And so I wrote it up, and Chris really didn't like the treatment that I wrote. He
Okay.
didn't wasn't what he was thinking about, and so we didn't do it together. Is how it happened. But it was he who got the ball rolling. I wouldn't have thought of that without him. And Doug Rushkoff, I'd sent it to him, and he said, "I love this. Can I be an executive producer in this?" And I said, "Yes, of course." And then so that's how the ball got rolling. So
So the last thing you did about magic was probably Book of Lies, or was it? I mean, Disinfocon was 2000 or 1999 or 2000.
it was 2000. It was February 19th, 2000, and I think Book of Lies came out in 2004.
2004. Okay. Because I remember I think the first thing I did at Disinfo was the ad for something else for Outfox or something like that in the back of that book. So that would have been, yeah, that could have been 2004 or early 2005. And so that's like, well, that's 20 years. So
Yeah.
first question is, what was your view? What were your views on magic then? what are your views on magic now? That's a long time to, I mean, are they the same or have they changed a lot?
No, they haven't changed at all. They're exactly the same.
Okay. So where are you at with that?
Well, I mean, same as I've ever been. I mean, if you wanted my viewpoint of magic, or
Yes.
what it be, I see magic as largely a secular thing, something that does not go against science, but that is completely
Mhm.
congruous with science. I'm sure that you feel that way yourself.
Yeah.
Many people do, and that's
Yeah.
certainly
Yeah.
something I discovered while I was interviewing these dozens of people about it. They all had a very, none of them were woo woo in any way. There
That's
was no
great. That's great.
new age silliness. Not one person, not
That's
one
great.
person was that way. Yeah, no, it was nice. But the way that I look at things, myself, it's about willpower. It's about, being able to start a project and finish it. I also view magic as a metaphor for creativity. And that's something that I think I got from Kenneth Anger, just realizing that sort of anything that you do could be a spell. So, a company like Disinformation, the Disinformation Company Limited, that was a spell. To me, it was. You know
Hmm.
what I mean?
Hmm.
My business partner might not have felt that way, and I'm sure he didn't. But to me, it was. And so that's that sort of thing. Like I said, it's a metaphor for creativity, and if you put your mind, you use that sort of way of looking at a problem, you can solve it in more creative ways. So I see it that way. And then on the other side, on the more, the truly occult, because that's not any different from what we would read in a business book, or the
Right,
Holy
right, right,
Bible, or
right,
anything
right.
like
Yeah,
that.
that's one point that you always used to make to me a lot that is I've definitely taken with me and is definitely true. Just the stuff about Napoleon Hill, New Thought, but not just
Yeah.
that, the idea that a lot of the secret, and this is something we used to talk about at Disinformation, just that a lot of the quote unquote manuals of magic and secrets are in places you would not be, like, they're not in the occult section. They could be hiding in the business
Best
section,
one,
or,
the best ones. Yeah.
yeah,
I mean, I
yeah,
would
yeah,
put
in plain sight
Napoleon
usually.
Hill in that category. That
Hmm.
is one of the
Hmm.
best things. I mean, it's funny because I always tell people, like, especially if someone younger, like, that's really the book that you want to read. And I wish I would have
That's good
found that
advice. Yeah.
at your age. But in fact, when I read the book, I sort of realized, like, oh, I do these things either intuitively or because of magic, of having that sort of mindset. I was, there
Yeah.
wasn't much in Napoleon Hill where I said, oh, I should start doing that. It was more me thinking, like, oh, you know, I've already been on this, for a
Yeah.
while. But so, like I say, there's that side of things, which which you don't have to believe in anything. You know what I mean? It's just a secular, as I was saying, nothing different from a business
Right.
book.
Right.
The other hand, there's the more spiritual side of it, or the more occult side of it, or the occluded side of it. And
Hmm.
on that level, I think that it's important to make contact with the thing, the entity, whatever it is, the force in the universe that makes the coincidences happen, the synchronicity
Yeah.
generator.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the thing, and that to me is the whole game.
Do you take synchronicities as indications that something is going right or that you're on the right path?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
But that's about as far as I can take it. And in my life, as I've never found that even the grandest, most, like, mind-boggling, mathematically, improbable
Right.
synchronicities have ever added up to any sort of message ever. Nothing. Nothing.
Okay.
But on the
Okay.
other hand, yesterday I was on a podcast called "This Podcast is a Ritual."
You
Right?
mentioned. Yeah. Yeah.
Was fantastic experience. I highly recommend it. You should go on that podcast. You would love it. And Devin, the guy who runs it, he said that he looks at it this way, and this is the best metaphor. You're going to love this. It's like you're walking along a path, and there's lots of flowers around you, and it's a lovely path. That's what the synchronicities are like.
Oh,
But if you
okay. That's a
but
good
if you're
metaphor.
walking
Yeah.
down a
Yeah.
path and it's full of syringes and beer cans and broken bottles, it's a different thing.
Yeah.
You know, I thought that was a wonderful way of explaining it, because it really doesn't add up to anything. It's something that happens along the journey that you notice, but you know,
Yeah. One thing Grant said to me one of the times I talked to him was about people interpreting synchronicities and messages and looking for specific patterns. And his view on it was, no, the whole thing is the message. All
oh
of it
yeah.
at once, not specific little patterns or numbers and things. The whole thing is the message. And I thought that was a very clear way to look at it.
Well, he said something in an email recently where we were talking about a synchronicity that happened in relation to Magic Show. And he said something along the lines of, our lives are only the strokes, the paintbrush, and I thought that was a pretty good way of explaining it too.
That's a very that's a very old Zen master comment. That's great. Um, yeah, you've always had, I think, probably, if I'm correct, just a very mental or just intuitive way of magic. Like you don't do any of the, and I think you've made this point many, many times. You don't do any of the outward stuff or the rituals, and for you, it's basically just a thought, like a mental process.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I would describe it as a mental martial art, something you
Yeah.
get better at. But I mean, but honestly, at my ripe old age of 58 at this point, I don't feel like I have to practice magic. I feel like I'm quite good at it. I feel like I am magic. That's the way I look at the world and everything. And like I said before, if everything I do is magic and I look at it that way, as some sort of spell or sorcery, even in a mundane sense, then I just feel like I'm living it. Or you could say it another way. It's like some people have the evil eye. Some people are able to heal. But I've never done any kind of ceremonial magic, and I'm not interested in doing that.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not my way of it.
Yeah, one thing you said to me, I think the first time that I met you, when I went to you were living in the Valley in an apartment.
Mm-hmm. In Sherman Oaks.
Yeah, that's right. And I think the first thing you said, the first things you said to me was, you need to read everything that Crowley wrote. But then you need to read it again and ask, okay, what is he really saying? And so I've thought about that a lot over the years. And it seems like you also said to me at one point when we were at Disinfo, you pointed out that Crowley completely dropped any pretense of any of that somewhere in his mid-30s.
Yeah.
It was just gone. And so
exactly, he's only doing sex magic after a certain point.
Right. And that's basically how you look at it. It's just,
I mean, yeah, that's the thing. I'm not putting down somebody who finds their way through magic with.
No. That's not what I'm saying. I'm actually just curious. That's how you look at it, and that's how you've always looked at it. It's like just a straightforward mental process.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, most of what I want to happen does happen.
Okay.
I mean, like I have no complaints about my life or the way that it's gone. So, I mean, but again, that's just an orientation. I would say that it's an orientation towards the world. How about that?
Okay. So what was the biggest range of extreme opinions on what magic is between people that you interviewed?
There wasn't, I would say that there was hardly any daylight between all of them. Everybody had the same idea of it. Not exactly what I'm saying. I mean, the thing, it's Linda Lee Holm, who's a sort of a tarot priestess online and an author of several books. She said that she described it saying that, there's what you look at witchcraft and there's kind of like folk magic. There's healing, there's herbs, there's, that kind of thing. And then there's like the high ceremonial magic,
Okay.
But there weren't too many ceremonial magicians. It basically fell into the category of like that kind of witchcraft. You know what I mean? So you're doing it's working, and as witches say, or I totally lost my train of thought. I guess I got really high before this podcast.
Fair enough. Yeah, I ate way too many edibles last night, so I'm a little
You're feeling that way too, yeah.
Yeah. So it seems appropriate.
You're saying the range. There wasn't much.
There wasn't much range in opinion.
No, not really.
Okay.
No. I'm sorry. I think everybody looked at it sort of the same way. There was like a scientific thing. There was a prove it to me thing. There was this had been proven to me to my satisfaction element to all of it. But there wasn't any dissent that I would say. Not at all between 50 people.
And did people talk about the spiritual side of it at all?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
they still saw that as, okay. They still saw that as essentially rationalist and materialist.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they did. They did, for sure.
How very satanic. That's great. Yeah, I was just reading, I've been reading about the Islamic Antichrist, Dajjal, and he is supposed to be, one of his powers is to explain magic as a purely material phenomenon. I thought that's pretty good then.
That's why he's the Antichrist.
Right, right. How's Grant, by the way?
He's great. He's
Yeah.
great. It's good to talk to him. We had Doug and Grant and I had a Zoom conversation
Mhm.
not that long ago, and he's very excitable about the idea of teaching magic
Okay.
now, sort of pass it on, right? And as he pointed out to Doug and myself, that we're the old guys now, and sort of incumbent upon us to try to reach out and to do it, to actually do it. And he's very excited about that kind of thing right now. Teaching.
Okay. In what capacity?
I don't know. You'd have to ask him that. I mean, I do know that one thing that he is doing is there is a woman named Arden Lee, who lives in Los Angeles, and she's a musician and a chaos magician. She doesn't describe herself as a witch; she describes herself as a chaos magician, and she is. Grant has sort of, dubbed her, dinged her with the magic wand and refers to her as his magical heir.
Okay.
And they're going through correspondence, right? Not unlike Crowley would have done, Magic Without Tears, but a correspondence sort of thing where he's putting in writing what his thoughts are about magic.
Oh, that would be awesome to publish. That's an awesome project.
It's a great idea. And she's
a great idea.
Eloquent herself. So I think he's got a good partner in this to reach his level and bat it back and forth. That's phenomenal. I'm looking forward to it too.
So it's going to be like a Magic Without Tears style book.
Again, you'd have to ask him. I think that it's got something to do with the Tree of Life. This is the way that they're sort of going through it. But I don't know is the answer to that question. I just don't know.
That's great. So he's doing well though. I haven't talked to him. I went to his birthday once in LA when he was living on the Strip, and that was like probably would have been like 2016 or 2015, something like that. So almost 10 years.
He hasn't changed a bit in any way.
Wait, he's still living in the castle?
I think so.
Okay.
I think so.
How's Doug? I talked to him recently. Yeah, I speak to him on the podcast. He's great.
Did you go to the thing, the Genesis documentary thing in New York? Psychic TV, the band was reformed, so he played keyboards.
Oh, great. Okay.
And then David J from Bauhaus and the lead singer of the Bush Tetras sort of filled in place of Jen. But he loved it. He had a great experience, and that was one of the things that I think was really like almost like a life-changing thing for Doug recently, because he was sort of saying like that night and seeing all of those people and how much of the idea of magic sort of meant to people. He started to think that he wanted not to spend his time writing nonfiction anymore, but to work in fiction and in music.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
It is. It's you think of that's a big change for somebody like that.
That's a pretty big change. That sounds great. I'm sure he'll find that really personally freeing, which sounds good for Doug.
It's like a new chapter in his life.
Okay. So he's going to do his own music, or he's putting a band together or something like that?
I don't know. I know it's more creative projects as opposed to, documentaries or a nonfiction book.
Okay.
Media, less media theorizing, more, graphic novels.
Okay.
That kind of stuff.
That's
He's got
awesome.
a new comic working on.
That's great.
Yeah.
I approve. What you approve? You said.
I said I approve. Yes.
Oh, excellent. Yeah. Jen died since last time we talked. Like Jen died the day that COVID hit.
Oh, is that? Oh, that day.
Yeah, it was March 30th, 2020, or something like that. It was like as soon as it came in, Jen died. But and Adam Parfait died as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that, the thing is, the other day I was looking at the poster. I was cleaning up in my attic, and I found out one of the posters for the Disinfocon. I realized how many people on that, are gone. Paul Lawfully's gone. Kenneth Anger is now gone. Wilson is gone. I mean, it's like the world is a far less interesting place without people like Genesis and Paul Lawfully, David Bowie in it. You know what I mean? It's like,
yeah. How do you feel about where things are? Yeah, it's 2024 versus
horrible.
Versus the vision put out at Disinfocon.
Well, I mean, don't hold me to that, but in that, let's talk about Doug's speech, right? When he sort of declares that the counterculture is one, right? People, they can go and look this up on YouTube if they want to see it. Doug Rushkoff's speech at the Disinformation. He's saying the counterculture won. And what did the counterculture win? If you think of the classic counterculture as being, the Beats coming up through the hippies and Leary and punk and rave, and then cyberculture, or any of the rest of it, then that would have been things like being able to take drugs without fear of being arrested, being able to smoke pot legally, gay rights, and things of that nature. I mean, you really start to think, what were they for? Well, that's really what they were for, and those things have come to pass. And now there's a reaction to that.
Yeah,
that you would say that the new counterculture is these alt-right people. That's the counter to the culture that the classic counterculture sort of became the culture,
right
at a certain point. With the internet, right around the time that I did that TV show, right? So in 2000, when I did it was like right after that. If you think about it, it would have been impossible to do something like that again, because everything became known so fast. It wasn't like
that was before YouTube.
What's that?
That was before YouTube. I saw when you were doing the video for the Kickstarter, you were pointing out that you were doing Infinity Factory 9 years before YouTube.
Yeah, that's true.
But yeah, this is all way ahead.
Yeah, no, well, yeah. I mean, that's the thing, is that people think that YouTube has been around forever. It hasn't been. I mean, but there was, I did a webcast called the Infinity Factory at pseudo.com. And, and when you watch it, it was like this flickery, stamp-sized thing in a real player, if you remember that.
Yeah.
And that's what it was,
Yeah. So you were saying the state of the world is not great.
Well, I mean, I think we're at an inflection point where it could go either way. Okay. I mean, look at it. Look what happened in Britain just now. They seem to have made a very good choice, to elect a Labour government for the first time in a long time. The French were able to keep down fascism. The Italians were a little bit less up to that. And now look what's happening in this country. So, I mean, it's an inflection point. It could go either way. It could go into this really dark, barbaric place where stupidity and lying and mendacious behavior is elevated, or we can move forward. And I don't think anybody is wondering what I'm talking about, obviously, in this country. So that's the way I look at it. And if it goes the other way, which I don't think it's going to, I think that the happier, the sunnier outcome is what seems to be in the cards. But who knows? For the next 3 months, we don't know anything.
It's every morning it's something new that shifts the course of things. So it's been a little hard to predict.
It's been a novel, political season for sure.
It should calm down, hopefully.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, there's a rise in fascism. There's a rise in bad people doing bad things, and getting in and achieving influential positions in the hierarchy of human beings who listen to them. And the whole thing is just the world is in a hell of a mess, as Brother Theodore used to say.
Right. Yeah, Crowley, one of the things I talked about with Jen, and I think you a lot back in the day, was that Crowley says, or I think that you pointed this out in your book of interviews, and I reference it a lot. Crowley says the aeon can go one of two ways. It could be a aeon of enlightenment or a new dark age for humanity to surpass anything that happened in the last one. And that one's looking a little bit more likely.
Yeah. Who knows? Again, who knows? But it's worth bringing this up, right? Because you brought up that book. Paul Lawfully is also interviewed in that book, and one of his theories was basically, and I can't think of the exact years, but there's a point in human history where things are so bad that that time machines are prevented from going into that era. The time of the light, the time of the dark. That's the name of it. There's two pieces where he addresses that. It's quite profound, and it's very Paul Lawfully also, but it's something that's worth pondering.
Hopefully that's not anytime soon.
No, I think it'll be after our deaths. Let's hope.
Yeah. I think that the Utopian Spirit, I think this is an incredibly dark period, and I think that it's been too dark for too long to not turn around. And I don't think the world really wants to go into total warfare. I think that social media exaggerates the nature of things and riles people up in the process. The Facebook whistleblower talked about that there's a feedback loop between social media extremity and politicians having to take on positions from social media, so that you have politics now downstream of whatever people are saying on Facebook.
The most extreme.
And that's just like a death loop.
Oh yeah. No, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I was kicked off of Twitter 2 years ago.
Okay.
For telling some MAGA Nazi to fuck off. And he complained.
I kicked you off for that?
Yeah, and the thing about it wasn't even like I was saying like something like horrible. And I mean, like I could be as insulting as anybody on Twitter to it's like I was really good at it, hurling insults. And this was just like a go fuck yourself. It was like so prosaic. I couldn't believe I got kicked off for that when I could have gotten kicked off for hundreds, if not thousands, of far more insulting and nasty things that I would.
Was that Elon, when it was Elon Twitter, or before that?
It was before that.
Well, they kicked you off before that? That's bizarre.
Yeah, and then the thing is, I thought like, oh, I could get back on now when he bought it, and I thought, nah.
Yeah, that's the problem. I got back on when he bought it, and then I got sucked into it, and it's a terrible, terrible thing. It's really a terrible thing.
I'm like, trust me, if you can X that out of your life, or just make it to the point where you just, I'm going to do this an hour a day. My mood became a lot sunnier when I wasn't having some fucking flame or some fucking asshole. Like how it gets, and
Yes, I do.
Those chemicals into your system. It's not healthy. But again, I immediately felt better when I was, I no longer had the option to go online and scream at people from my keyboard.
Okay.
And have them scream back at me. It's like, it's a better lifestyle. Works for me.
I'll have to take that advice. Yeah. Mm-hmm. You mentioned also, like, I saw you where you posted about Magick Show on Dangerous Minds, and you said something like, we haven't gone anywhere. It's just that the internet sucks now.
Yeah. Well, it does, but that's the thing. It's like my two things. One is that basically my wife Tara said everything that's in that essay out loud. I transcribed it and said, I'm just going to steal everything you just said because that's the way I think too. But the internet is, I mean, if you look at like two of the things that I noticed in two separate periods of research, right? The first period of trying to research who are the people that I'm going to interview on the show? Who are they? Right. I found that the whole occult, there's not a lot of community when you in the occult community. There's a lot of people, they don't know each other. You know what I mean?
They don't like each other. Yeah.
But think about it this way, right? There are some people who are well connected. If you have a podcast and you're reaching out to a lot of people and you become that spoke in the wheel,
Mm-hmm.
But most people aren't asked to be on a podcast. A lot of people write books under a pseudonym because they've got a job that they don't want to jeopardize, with the government or something like that, And but I found that there was almost no community, and there were like very, very, very few people who, when I would ask the question, oh, can you think of somebody else that you know? And the answer was almost always no, not really. And then there were some people who did know a lot of people. And again, there was somebody, Dr. Christina Oakley Harrington, who started Treadwell's bookstore in New York, in London. She knew a lot of people. She was only too happy to introduce me to a lot of people and send out, but there weren't too many people who were connected like that. I mean, that's the thing is, at the end of this, now I'm one of the best connected people in the occult world because I know all of these people. And but like I say, I saw very little evidence of any sort of community, right? And then the second time of just intense research and looking into this was like, how am I going to get the word out about this Kickstarter thing? And going to various places, and even the sort of places where you think like, okay, well, Reddit's our occult, our magic, there's a lot, there's nearly 500,000 members, but there's only 18 of them online at one time. You know what I mean?
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
And then people will talk about like all these. You got to tell all the Discord channels and join all these occult Discord. And like,
oh, come on, my God,
it's a waste of time. It's a complete waste of time. Another thing I was told was you got to get on TikTok and give me a fucking break.
Yeah, that's never worked out for me. Like I look at that, like now I feel it's.
I can only imagine,
having been on the internet since 1987, when people on CompuServe. Now when people show me TikTok, it's just like I feel like now I'm old. I can't process it. My brain just won't take it in. So
I mean, I found it fascinating for about a month,
okay, yeah, more than
and
I
now
did.
I don't look at it at all for any reason ever. So
Yeah.
it
Um,
was a that wore off really quickly. I think TikTok, but my point overall is being that there were no
there's no
places that you
community.
go to and say, yeah, exactly. Not even online. If you talk about like in the older internet in the '90s, the late '90s, there were a lot of these kind of like occult boards where people could
Yeah.
ask a question and get a considered response.
Alt
And
Magic news
and
group.
now it's like it's here's my 45-second video explaining how to do a curse with a potato and some needles. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's that's kind of what I experienced in that way. So I thought that was kind of interesting too. That there's just a lacking of community. But what I really saw, and this goes back to your question actually, is around 2020. So right around when the pandemic hits, all blogs and podcasts they mostly just stop. All of
Yeah.
the occult stuff, the counterculture stuff, Dangerous Minds stopped right
Hmm.
at that. But it's just there was no energy being put into that anymore. And if you think back to the early internet and all of these sites that were just so incredible to look at. Remember Deoxy.org?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Right. And I mean,
Great.
like you could spend hours
Thought
and
about that in a long
days,
time.
months on that, just reading all of that stuff, the Terrence McKenna stuff, the Robert Anton Wilson stuff, the Leary stuff. You could go to these, and even before that, you could go to like a bulletin board system like Temple of the Screaming Atom, I think it was called, where you could like dial into it, and down it was text only back then,
Yeah.
but you could download like how to make bombs
Yeah, yeah, I
and
remember I ran a BBS off a laptop, like out of a phone jack in my bedroom at my parents' house. So
it was more exciting then.
it was very exciting. I guess that same spirit is kind of on, I suppose, the deep web or onion site, something like that. But that's a scary place. So,
Mm.
but that sense of obviously there's no sense of there's no sense of rebellion on the internet. It's just a pervasive force we can't escape.
Well, it's just become this shit. I mean, it's like I say
Mhm.
in that essay. The one line that was mine was, and not Tara's, was that it's like Wally's Planet. It's just
Yeah, yeah,
we're just walking through trash.
yeah.
Nothing stands out. Very few things are particular interest. And the other thing is, I find that instead of going, all over the internet like I would have done at the beginning and just looking in all of these fascinating places, I stick to the New York Times, to Raw Story, to Mediaite, and even things like Drudge Report. I mean, it's just I just want like a News Digest or a reputable publication like the New York Times. You know what I mean? And that I think is worth paying for. But I look at the rest of it, and like, maybe the Guardian, but I look at the rest of it, and it's just like it's lacking in so many, in many different ways, and it becomes it's of no interest to me, really. I have to say that for somebody who's made my reputation and my
Hmm.
career in the internet, I am fucking over it. I'm well over it. It seems like a waste of your life to always be looking at a screen all the time, as I have been forced to do for the past 20 years of mine.
Huh.
I'm not interested in doing that for the remaining time I have on Earth. I'll tell you that much.
So you're interested in filmmaking?
What's that?
So you're interested just in the filmmaking
Yeah.
documentary, doing that?
No, not necessarily. I mean, who knows where this project goes from
Okay.
here? Don't know.
Yeah. Is this
I've
gonna
been
is this
thinking
gonna
for a book.
be is this gonna be a website as well? Like there's different levels to it?
Well, let me give you the story of how it happens. Is that
Hmm.
I was asked, if you wanted to, if I gave you some money to do a pilot, how much would you need, and what are the resources that you would need, and where would you? And so I said, well, I would like to go to, I would need to go to London. I would need to be in LA for a week and in New York for a week, and I think that would be enough. And but I was there was a very we shot in a very efficient way, right? If you notice in the background, everybody's against that same red background, right?
Hmm.
So they came to us. It wasn't like we had to go to 51
Okay.
people and up in their study and videotape them. No, it wasn't like that at all. It was like they're in for an hour, and then the doorbell rings, and it's the next person's like, goodbye to you, hello to you, get mic'd up. So it was just like we were doing. And I think in one day I think the busiest day I did 9 interviews in one day. It was exhausting, but it was
These
a
are
lot of
these are,
fun.
these are like hour long, 2 hour interviews.
They were about an hour.
That's a lot.
A few people. I interviewed for about an hour and a half.
Okay.
Mitch Horwitz, I interviewed for a long time.
Mitch
Phil
is
Baker,
great, right?
he is the best.
Mitch is a wonderful guy.
What he is, but I always say like he's Mitch Horowitz because he's so good at what he does.
Yeah.
He's so good at what he does, and so professional. And when he was so good that after Mitch's interview, the crew and I would constantly say, "Oh, that person got the Mitch Horowitz Award for the day." If someone was particularly on and particularly good, we gave them the Mitch Horowitz Award.
That's great. Yeah, he brings a lot of class to this. he raises the bar to a higher level that it probably should be at.
And he's just such an articulate guy. But when I'm questioning him, I would ask the question, he would put his head down, he would raise his head up, and then he would speak like extemporaneously for like about a minute and a half, or even sometimes less, and everything was perfect. And you're sitting on the other side of the camera, and you're thinking like, yeah, this is great. And that was the beautiful thing about it was it wasn't just Mitch. There were so many people who were just solid gold for an hour. Gary Lackman, for instance, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I just talked to him. I saw you retweeted that.
I mean, talking about good value, you know what I mean? I mean, he knows a lot of stuff. Maja Dawu, the Witch of the Dawn in Los Angeles. What a mind she has, you know what I mean? So it was like to be able to draw that out of people and have them speak freely about it, because that was the thing that a lot of people who I'd never met before, they were kind of surprised and thought like, oh, I've never been asked questions like this before. It's always just like, like goofy questions that you would be asked or that you would see people being asked. They were surprised when the questions came from the point of view of somebody who takes it as a baseline reality that magic works.
Yeah, that's definitely
a question of that. Does it work or not? That was never a question to my mind, and not a question that anybody would have addressed.
Yeah, that's the NLP presupposition that magic exists.
The Structure of Magic, of course, is the title of the first NLP book.
So one of the points that so I wanted to address one thing that you did say about there not being a lot of community. Definitely when I talk to people, like I'm talking to people every week on the podcast, and I have been for like 7, 8, 9 years now. So in my mind, it's like there is a community. I'm connected to all these people. But then when I meet people,
you're the connector. You are the connector.
Yeah. Then I meet people and they say like, I don't know anyone else who does this, unless they're like, like Mickey Pellerano knows everybody, people like this.
Right.
Right.
I interviewed me.
He's great. He's great.
He was phenomenal on camera. Phenomenal. Excellent.
Yeah, we did a course together. He taught a course on using astrology for wealth on magic.me that did very well. He really takes what he does seriously. Anyways, what was I saying? What was I talking about before I said Mickey? Oh, the connector. So when I talk, I'm sorry. I can edit that part out. So it's kind of like it really is the Hermetic tradition, because whenever I talk to people, they say like I'm usually the only one I know. And so I take that for granted that I've been surrounded by people basically my entire life. I mean, you remember I interviewed Grant for the old Disinfo site. And then I went to work at Disinfo in like 2003. But I mean, ever since the age of 17, every job I've had, every relationship I've had, every project I've done, everything has been magic. Like all the people that I know, like every single thing. I don't know if that's healthy, but that's basically been my life.
Well, I would think that that's lucky. It's that you're around people who understand actually how the world does work.
Well, that's a good way to look at it.
They've actually figured reality out.
Yeah.
Just to the degree that we can in these meat suits.
But yeah, so I take it for granted that people know each other, but they really don't. And so this is a cool project, hopefully, and continuing to build that. I'm always cynical about occultists getting along, but hopefully, this is a really good project. Why now? Do you think it's a particularly important time to do that and to build community now?
Yeah, I do. Like, again, it can tip into a dark age. It can go into a utopian direction. Either way, if magicians are connected and and have communication between each other, it can only be a good thing. It can only be a good thing. And it could be, that's the thing is, I mean, it's not like I personally am trying to start a movement or anything like that, but people should do that. I think it's a good idea that many people would have that idea and start to say, let's reach out to each other, or let's find some kind of repository online where we actually can all meet and do something, and or agree on something, and some sort of action to do, or whatever. I mean, like I say, it would just be a good thing if there was.
So yeah.
I mean, like I say, I think it's a rare thing. I would, in my life, I don't have that many people I can talk to magic about. Not at all. I mean, I have fewer people I could speak to Crowley about.
Mm-hmm.
At a certain level where it's just,
Right.
So you don't, you know what I mean? So you don't. I mean, that's the thing is, I mean, I've had friends for 30 years who I have never discussed anything about magic with.
Okay. That's probably healthy.
People that I'm in contact with like all day long, just sending shit back to the internet. But people I've known for 30 years, I've never discussed it with them. They know how I see the world. They don't need to ask me or have me tell them, but I never have discussed it with, I would say, most, if not many, if not most of my closest friends.
Yeah. Well, I think right now, like, the world has gotten so extreme, and the resurgence of theocracy and fascism was not expected. Maybe I should have.
No.
I mean, Jen always used to go on and on about they're coming, but
I wouldn't have thought so. It's, that's the thing is, I just thought history was just going to keep moving the same direction and we would have better technology. How wrong I was, how naive I was. But I would never have thought that there would be a resurgence of fascism in the early 21st century. No way. Would not have predicted that.
Yeah. And we're Christian nationalism also is worrying. Even if QAnon, which is practically a new satanic panic, or is a new satanic panic.
Mm. And I haven't thought about it that way, but that is a good way to describe it.
It's the same type of craziness. Yeah.
Shit, not nonsense. Yeah.
Right. And
I was told recently that Q has come back, and that now the latest drops, as they say, have not been picked up or amplified the same way that they were. And that's the other thing too, is QAnon was, as a phenomenon, if you look at the way that went around and how it's like it's nothing, and then boom, it's everywhere. And like the next day, the Russians were amplifying that signal. Please. Okay. It was, that's what was going on. But the other thing, what I find fascinating about it, right, and it's almost like a weird comic book, is you have that father and son who were like running like these 8chan type of sites, and and arguably have been rumored to be, having like kiddie porn that they're serving on their servers and stuff like that. And they're obviously two fucking nutcases. And and that's the thing. It's like, I mean, imagine if you were like a QAnon adherent, and then somebody sat you down, propped your eyeballs open like Alex in a Clockwork Orange, and made you watch some of these documentaries that were on Vice, for instance, about these people. And it's like, I mean, how could you not conclude, oh my God, I've been the biggest fool in the world. If these two assholes, these dipshits, are the one feeding my brain, I'm stupider than they are. I mean, but it doesn't seem to have an effect. It's a really bizarre mindset. I mean, and the other thing is, it's infected so many people. You know what I mean? It's the really depressing thing I think about the modern era, or that's something that the internet itself has revealed, is that basically 1 out of 3 people in this country is a fucking asshole.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I remember, it's like in the 90s, you had the utopian dream of the internet and John Perry Barlow's manifesto and all of that. And it's kind of like, I guess it shouldn't have been a surprise that when you give the world communication technology, it doesn't automatically bring them up to the level of people posting on the well. It just allows them to express what they were.
It gets dumbed down from there.
Right. It just allows them to do the same bizarre things they've been doing, for the rest of the whole of human history. Spread medical disinformation, organize genocide, all kinds of insane stuff. So,
yeah. Well, have you read that book? It's called The Chaos Machine. I can't think of the author's name. That I read that when it came out. It's about 2 years now. That book is really worth reading. I mean, that guy went through so many different kinds of statistics to look at, and he's crunched so much information into that book. But it does not paint a rosy picture of the internet's, influence on mankind and on health and on the health of nations, not just individuals. But I mean, it's a frightening thing to think about. I mean, one of the things that he talks about in that book is there's an example of how I guess it was a Muslim guy posted. He was living in India, posted on Facebook that he was going to a Hindu restaurant, and his brother told him that he overheard the owner saying that we're putting something in the food of the Muslim clients at the restaurant that would cause them to lose their erections. Right? That and an angry mob came to that place and burned that restaurant down. You know?
Yeah.
I mean, think about that. I mean, that's, and none of these social media giants have any. They're not going to stop that. How could they? They'd have to shut down completely to stop something like that happening.
So what, this book is called The Chaos Machine. I mean, one of the things that you've been really great about is also finding books like that, or Lucifer Principle, or things, very future thinking books that you wouldn't have found otherwise, and recommending those. So that's kind of the same type of thing you're recommending. Or also, what's the guy's name? Charles Hugh, the Of Two Minds blogger,
Oh yeah, Charles Hugh Smith.
Yeah.
One of the three smartest people I've ever met is Charles Hugh Smith. His blog is called Of Two Minds. And the amount of information that guy has in his head that he's able to put out on a daily basis, 5 days a week on his blog is simply astonishing.
Well, he's still going.
Oh yeah, he's going strong. In fact, he probably devotes more time to it now because I think he's retired. He's living in Hawaii now.
Okay. So other than The Chaos Machine, there are other things on your radar of that nature, like future looking books, or things that you think are particularly explanatory about what's been going on the last 4 or 5 years?
No, I wouldn't say so. But that book I think is oh, actually there is one. I think it's Black Pill. It's the book written by Ellie. I can't think of her last name. That brilliant reporter who's been on Vice. She was reporting on the alt-right.
Oh yeah. I know who you're talking about.
Ellie Reeve. Okay. That book is phenomenal. Black Pill. I highly recommend that book because it talks about how the sort of meme magic thing starts. The whole idea of wizards. These incel wizards. If you become a wizard, if you are still a virgin at the age of 30,
right?
But it talks about how influential these really misanthropic, malcontented miscreants, how much influence they have over the world. In the sense that these people are coming directly from 4chan and 8chan and all of the different places, and they have found a way. That's the thing, is they have found a way to start a community, and there is strength in numbers, and you have to think of it this way too, is like, if you're a solo magical practitioner versus a sort of a coven of practitioners, it becomes like a choir. You're saying things loudly. It amplifies the signal. These people have found community, and the wizard community. Then they have taken that, and then that becomes meme magic, and it's not just that, it's Pepe the Frog type of stuff, all these sorts of things, kek, as they say. And I mean, that's the sort of thing that I would think there should be some kind of magical counterpoint to that. You know what I mean? More utopian, life affirming, not fucked up and dark and weird version. There's got to be a counterpoint to that.
Well, there has to, or it's just going to be that. And then it's kind of like, it's like all,
it's only that. Yeah.
Yeah. And then it's kind of like all the energy that was generated by projects like Disinfo is then just, for them to pick over, and kind of like we had spoken about, apparently Russian trolls were using Disinfo.
Yeah.
To put stuff out. I mean, that's just very, very disheartening.
Yeah, well, I mean, I wasn't there. Someone told me about that.
Okay.
But I think you should invite Thad McCracken on your show.
Okay.
I think you would be really interested to hear that, because I look at that kind of stuff. I mean, the idea that the Russians would have played such an amazingly long game, that they would have tried to infiltrate, as it were, a website like Disinformation to actually spread disinformation, is kind of amazing if you think of that level of symmetry and the irony of all of that. a company that tells you up front, that it's a disinformation company.
It's very cold. It's very Cold War, like John le Carre book.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah, it is. But
Just finding symmetry. Yeah, with the Russians.
Well, but there, the thing is, that is how conspiracy theory culture goes from being something that would be more as the classically defined, beats and punk and all of that kind of stuff, or Robert Anton Wilson, or UFOs, or X-Files, and then that's how that got sort of morphed into like MAGA and all of this sort of alt-right stuff. It was very, I mean, that's the Russians they're capable of leaving a bomb with a very fucking long fuse. They're geniuses at it. And the thing is, I view something like that, okay, as black magic. That's black magic.
Yeah.
Propaganda is black magic. Propaganda is magic. I mean, think about somebody like Goebbels. I mean, how could not? He's a great. But the Russians are doing the same thing. If you're trying to, if the Russians are actively setting up as an act of information warfare, the same kind of warfare that Genesis was talking about, the Robin Gristle were talking about, Burroughs was talking about,
and they're very good at it.
Well, it's black magic. You want to harm, they're trying to create chaos, sow dissent, make people angry. I mean, you could look at what the Russians do, just arguing with people on Twitter or something like that, which is literally getting paid to do. It's like some Russian kid with headphones on, just saying,
yeah,
you're a fucking piece of shit, dude. And and then that person gets angry, and then they go out and have road rage, or this kind of thing.
Do you think they're thinking about it even down to that level of just getting people worked up?
It seems obvious.
Wow.
Well, okay. Well, think about it this way. The example that I think is the most illustrative of how they work is, apparently there was a Russian set up a Facebook event page for a pro-gun demonstration in Dallas. That same person or a different Russian set up a Facebook event page for an anti-gun gun control group across the street on the same day at the same time. So, I think exactly that's what they're trying to do. And if they can bring that into the real world, like in that way, they've done something quite incredible. I think you'll agree. But that's black magic. They're trying to harm their enemies from a distance. It doesn't matter how it's done. That's magic. That's black magic.
Yeah. And they're very good at it. And now it's not just them. It's also the Chinese and Iran, and China, particularly through TikTok, manipulating TikTok algorithms, is something I don't know a ton about. But apparently, Chinese TikTok is all STEM content. And over here, it's just the most inane, vapid, mind-rotting things possible.
And it's always going to be that way from here on out. It's a systemic thing. You're not going to be able to. How could you take a scalpel and cut all of that out of the internet, and it would fall apart? That is what it is.
Well, that would be my question. I mean, it's like, at that point, at what point do you have to, without instituting censorship on the internet? But still, it's like, how do you prevent that?
Well, I think what has to happen, or what will happen ultimately, is that, I believe that this is already true. Like, how like old people are like, they're taken in by scams and all this kind of stuff. You always hear about horrible things. With AI, it's getting even worse. But I think that younger people, if someone is like 17, they're going to be more media literate than someone who's in their 80s, or even someone who's my age, for instance.
One would hope. I don't know.
But I think that will happen, and they'll become inured to it over time. It'll what appears to be bull, but maybe not. Maybe I'm completely wrong. As these words are coming out of my mouth, I realize how stupid they might sound to somebody else. I mean, we can only hope. That's my sunny prediction of what could happen.
Well, I think one of the things that's most important about magic, as I see it, is always positing, always going for what you want, and postulating and creating the future you do want, instead of reacting to the ones you don't.
Yeah.
And I think that applies on every level. Go for the thing. Don't react to the resistance, because then
that's absolutely, that's absolutely true. That's true in martial arts. You don't want to be on the back foot. You want to go on the offensive right as soon as you can.
Yeah. And I forget I forget that from time to time, but that just is how it works. I think it's an objective thing. So I bring that up in the context of what you were saying about having community and people putting out a new vision into the world. And if you have thoughts on what that would be, or if that came up in any of the interviews.
Well, I mean, I don't know what that would be. That's for, the group mind to come up with. I mean, I don't necessarily have an opinion about that, but I mean, but vis-a-vis this project that I'm working on, this Magick Show thing, the idea is to pass it on. It's like, it was like that conversation with Grant. It was like passing it on. That was, he said that's the imperative that for us to do that, because we're the old guys now. We're the same age that, Robert Anton Wilson was when we met him. You know what I mean? So so people are going to look to you to be able to give them some kind of guidance, and because you can do it, well, then you should do it. And that was basically just what Grant said. And I thought that was, I really reverberated around my mind. And I hadn't thought about the idea of sort of teaching magic, but that let's put it this way, from the time that it was decided to do a Kickstarter to today, or even when we launched it, that project changed a lot. It started off as being like an idea of a TV show that would present things, from an occultist point of view, sort of for other occultists in that sense. It's shocking me that no one has done a show like that before, with all of the fucking TV shows that exist. Why did that never exist? It is strange when you think about it. Seems like an obvious thing to me.
Yeah.
But
particularly in the streaming age. I mean, and you look at the
seems like a no-brainer.
Yeah, and you look at the amount of money that Gaia makes, for instance, like UFO shows. Right. It's not like that huge of a sell, I don't think.
Yeah. The other thing, if you look at it, there's how much interest there is in that topic in the culture. People who were raised in Harry Potter books, MCU films, shows, all of these, WandaVision, all these kind of things, Doctor Strange, they hear terms like chaos magic, and they speak about chaos magic in their podcasts that go out to, 172 other MCU fans. But they're using a term that they think is something fictional. And you would have to think that audience would be interested in, like, something of the real occult, what the history of what chaos magic is. You want to use that term properly? There's a history behind that. But no, that was not the case. And there was not a great deal of interest in seeing this project, I have to say, at the streamers.
Oh, really?
There was no star attached to it. Okay. There was no fame. There was no celebrity. So it would be like that, like, oh, do you think so-and-so would be a good host for this? And it was like, no. And also to have done that, to like be like, oh, Will Smith is going to be the host of it. Like, it would have just been insulting to the people that agreed to it. It would have just dumbed it down and made it something so stupid. It would have just been this incongruous thing added on to something. I don't want to do that. I didn't want to do that. And then it was suggested by Tom Nagovin, who's a mutual friend of ours, and a guy who has worked on the new Caligula thing. And he's an art book publisher of some renown. And I was talking to him, and he said, why don't you just do it on Kickstarter? And that had never occurred to me before. But once it was freed of the need to be squashed into a 40-minute television show, I realized a lot of that stuff that I cut out, I can put back in and sort of expand.
Okay.
And so that's kind of what has happened creatively. I went back and looked at a rough cut, the very first rough cut that we had finished, and I was asked to cut 15 minutes out of it. You know what I mean? And so when I watched that version after not seeing it for like a year, I was like, oh shit, this is actually better. This is a lot better.
The way it is now.
No, the way that it was.
Okay.
The way it was. I mean, I like the way that I like the version that we cut for the demo of it, the rough that we were planning to show around. But I will like it more when I'm able to just let it breathe a little bit more.
Okay.
Like, I'll give you an example, right? I've said this in so many podcasts that I regret it saying it again, but then again, probably there's only 3 people in the world that have listened to all of these podcasts that I've done in the past couple of weeks. But Rodney Orpheus. So Rodney Orpheus is a great example of this, because he told a story on camera about meeting Marjorie Cameron in 1995.
Oh, wow.
He came to Los Angeles, and a friend of his hooked him up. And so he met Cameron. And he tells that, he's an extremely charming guy. He's got this great Irish accent. And this story was just beautiful, but it took 5 minutes to tell. he talks about what they did, smoking a joint. They went to see a movie, all of these different wisecracks that she made. He was doing imitations of her gravelly voice. It was just a
That's great.
phenomenally great thing to have on camera. But going back to like, having to, how would I have made television out of that? You know what I mean?
I see. Yeah.
Got on YouTube, but you can't use that. So now I can, because it's this masterclass idea. Like I say, it's been able to spread out. And so that is like, it pained me to think that I would have to leave that story on the cutting room floor, and now now I don't have to do that. So that's important.
That's great.
It makes it a lot better. It makes it a lot better. Not doesn't make it worse. It makes it a lot better. It's I'm less interested in entertaining somebody with something that's fast moving and high octane. Right. Or I'd rather educate them in that way, or introduce them to somebody that they would benefit from being introduced to.
Yeah, I think that the format of long conversation also is kind of the saving grace of the internet, and allows for, if you talk to somebody for 2 hours, I do 2-hour podcast every week. So it's like when you talk to somebody for 2 hours and you can really get down to their stories of magic. Like I talked to a woman, Dr. Cressida Stone, who did a book about Santa Muerte, but she talks about, praying to Santa Muerte while hiding from death squads coming for her in El Salvador or something like that. And the magic works. You get like really crazy stories, but also it kind of it demystifies it, which is good, which I'm always for.
See, that's my goal too.
Because when you shove it into a soundbite, then it can be,
exactly.
You can imagine anything about it.
Well, yeah, I mean, that was the thing. One of the people who was particularly good on camera because she was extremely revealing about her methods and about her insights was Magick Show.
Okay.
The Witch of the Dawn, Los Angeles. I mean, she's just a brilliant, brilliant, brilliant person. And she was able to really, it wasn't like I eased her into with a 2-hour conversation like you're describing. I think that's a good technique, actually, is to let people talk for a while, warm them up, and then hit them with how do you do magic question?
Yeah,
but she's like right out of the gate, she was really open about talking about the way she worked, in a way that a lot of people weren't. And one of the things that I would like to do with this Kickstarter is, if it makes more money than the bare minimum, which is kind of what it's set for at this point, I'd like to do some long form, like Charlie Rose type of thing, where I could go, we'll talk to her. Eric Davis, somebody I did not get to interview. I would certainly like to do that with Mitch, Doug, Grant. There's certain people who were just like really good about it, and to go that in depth and say, how do you really practice? Like really, really practice. Right. How do you work? That was definitely a goal. I mean, I agree with what you're saying as well about the internet. The only saving grace of it is I watch a lot of interview podcasts.
Yeah.
Did you ever watch Diary of a CEO?
No. What is that?
I can't think of the young man's name who does it. Steven something. He's like an entrepreneur who made a lot of money in his late 20s. It's shot in London, very high production values, but he has like 2-hour long interviews with some absolutely amazing people. It's called Diary of a CEO. I think he's stuck with that title now because it's so popular, but I think he has like 6 million followers on YouTube. I highly
get a lot out of it.
Yeah, I do. There's one, the first one that I listened to was, there's a guy, his name is escaping me. I'll probably think of it in a second, but a guy who was the head of Google's, like the research lab, like the place where they, like the craziest, most outlandish thing. He was the guy that ran that, and he was working on the AI stuff, and he left to basically, warn about AI, but he also started this thing called the Happiness Project. But I think if you go to this Diary of a CEO's YouTube channel, you would find it rather quickly. It's probably one of the most very popular episodes that he ever shot. But this guy hurls phenomenally sophisticated interviews out into the world.
That's great.
That's twice a week. Oh yeah, it's amazing. It's hard to keep up with. It's like Tim and Eric. There's just so much of it that you just get lost.
Yeah, I do think that long form content really is a saving grace, and also it allows you to see the human being instead of the idea, and that's very revealing. And another way, I think one thing you pointed out to me when we were at Disinfo is, in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s, you would get occult books and it would be, the Cybernomicon or something like that with chaos stars all over it. You would imagine, who these people must be wizards that live in castles and things like that. And then you made the point to me that, well, now you can just go to, at that point, it was like, now you can just go to their MySpace and it's just like InfoWars or Facebook. And it's just like InfoWars links and, granola mom conspiracy stuff. And it's just like, oh, it's that type of person. Yeah, it's that type of person.
Yeah, it's a dead giveaway. But one thing that I always thought was fun is, when you meet your heroes and you go to their house and like open the fridge and look and see what's inside the fridge or whatever, you're like, what kind of coffee mugs do they have? Do they match? You know what I mean? Like that kind of thing. It's always thought that was a fascinating thing to do, is to be in the home of somebody who you admired or liked their work or whatever.
You said to me, I think at one point that the last time you went to visit Robert Anton Wilson, he only had a Thoth tarot deck in the fridge.
I don't know. I don't.
Maybe I remember this
that,
wrong.
but I think I would. You'd hear I guess the mailman is because you can hear the dog downstairs. I don't remember saying that, but I've had to go and I would make coffee and tea when I was at his place because he wasn't able to get up, so I would just do it. So I've been in his fridge literally.
Okay. What are some of your favorite memories of talking to him and being there?
All of them. Every minute that I ever spent with the guy was fantastic. I met Bob first at the Phoenix bookstore in Santa Monica, and that would have been probably like 95, maybe earlier than that. Maybe where actually I met him? There was a thing called, it was like some Millennial Madness. Roy of Hollywood, who's on KPFK radio.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, he's like the overnight guy. He's been on for like 30 years. He's the guy that had Dave Emery, and he would have on, he had an Alan Watts thing like twice a week. It was just like that, like free form radio kind of thing. But it was Roy of Holly was the host of it, and the speakers were Timothy Leary, Paul Krasner, and Robert Anton Wilson. And so I'd met Leary long before that, and Paul I knew also, and but it was the first time that I met Bob, and it was outside smoking a joint, right? So that was like the first time I met him. I was smoking a joint, and I said, "Do you want some too?" He said, "Yeah," and so that's how that happened. And then I saw him again at the Phoenix bookstore. It was another situation where it's outside, it's over. He's having a cigarette. I'm like, "Hey, do you want to hit in this joint?" Yeah, so there was that. Like so every time that I was with him, we were always high together. So I was always completely stoned out of my gourd when I was around Bob, and so was he. So we had that kind of hangout. We sat and just and talked about that. But I will tell you one thing, and this is not a happy memory. It's just a memory. It's a profound memory. But one thing that he said to me that I will never forget, we were sitting on his porch outside of his house in Capitola. And it was in this apartment building, like with typical California, like modern apartment building with the cottage cheese ceilings and all that kind of stuff. And it was you had this beautiful view of the Pacific Ocean from his balcony. But oddly enough, he had never actually gone down to the water himself the entire time he had lived there. Right? He told me I was rather surprised because it was so close to the ocean. It was right there. But so we're sitting there, and he was chain smoking Marlboro Reds. Right. And I said, "Hey, Bob, they're going to kill you, And he goes, "Oh, I hope they do." And then I was like, "Oh, that's a little pessimistic." And he's he said, he goes, "Listen," he was like, "I got to tell you," he's like, I think he was like 72 when he said this to me. He was like, "Getting older is about this, outliving everything that you've ever loved. And every musical artist that you ever liked is now dead. And every film director that you liked is not, and you don't care about the things that are coming up now as much." It was just like, and it was just kind of like, you could just see he was just kind of like detaching from that, and, but I would usually, if I was going to San Francisco, I would either see Bob on the way there or on the way back, normally on the way back, get really high, and then mostly back to LA,
Okay.
But that's the thing, if you always ask people like, oh, like you meet your heroes and which ones have been, believe me, he is the greatest person in the world to meet and know. and have memories of. And, he did not disappoint in any way. He was exactly who you thought he was going to be.
Okay.
And you can't say that about Leary. You know what I mean? Like Leary had his foibles were fairly manifest, to people who knew him. So, so it's like that, or Ken Anger, you know what I mean? Like Ken was mad, bad, and dangerous to know. He was homicidal. He was literally homicidal. I'm not joking.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, but Bob Wilson, the greatest, the best of all, the greatest of the great.
Where do you think that he was at towards the end of his life? I mean, I know that he was probably in a lot of pain from not getting medical marijuana for polio symptoms, but maybe outside of that or before that, because I imagine at that point you don't really think about anything else. But where do you think he was at with his view of the world?
Well, I mean, you always hear this talk about him being how he was like a libertarian and all of this kind of stuff, and that's not really true. I don't think. I mean, he had a healthy skepticism of all political parties, but there was no question that he was a progressive. No question at all, right? But also, I mean, he had a list. There was like an email list that he would write out every day, and he just forward interviews, not interviews, but articles that he thought were good and stuff, and people would comment on it. So it was like a lot of people that were friends with him. Some of the people you would recognize, they were like physicists and people that he would have known in those circles, and other people who just that socially. But it was probably about 30 to 50 people, and he would send that out every day, multiple times a day.
Wow.
So once you were on that list, you were going to hear from Bob, up to 6 or 7, 8 times a day. So wow. There's definitely a record of what he was thinking about historically, in those emails.
What was he mostly thinking about? Where was he at?
Again, he was a progressive man, utopian mindset. I think he had a like in his books, he was interested in the future. And I think that he felt that the future was going to be a good one. That it was only going to get better for mankind. I think he definitely felt that we were going in a good direction.
Yeah, it doesn't feel that way quite so much anymore.
No. Well, now we know. You know what I mean? Now we know. I love to trace it back to the day that I sort of realized, oh shit, this is the human race really is not a hell of a mess. It was right when we talked about YouTube starting earlier when YouTube started, and then you see YouTube comments, and that was when it was like, oh, I mean, you just realize that the general public is a bunch of fucking morons.
Yeah.
And nothing but, and that was a depressing thing, I think, to think. And then I remember vividly watching a videotape. It was not a video, a YouTube video of Sarah Palin, and she was talking in St. Clairsville, Ohio, which is near where I'm from, and seeing like they would cut to the audience, and she's saying something that's these sort of dog whistle racism sort of quips that she would come up with. And she was, she was virtually unknown. She had just been picked as the VP. It was my first time seeing her because I didn't watch any of the convention. And they cut to the audience, and it was like, and these people were like cheering this nonsense on. And I thought, my God, these are the people I grew up with. These are literally the people I went to high school and grade school with, and they're cheering this shit on. Yeah, it's depressing. It's depressing. I mean, it doesn't. I mean, that's the thing. Yes, it's depressing, and the human race, I feel, has let me down. But I still feel very utopian. I mean, I've never not been. I feel like thinking that things could get better. I think right now with AI throwing a lot of people out of jobs, if we would move into a situation where there was a guaranteed income for people, I mean, I think how is that going to? You know what I mean? Think of that from the point of view, like, how would Wilhelm Reich look at something like that transpiring, where people are able to, you'll be able to self-actualize more in that.
I think that's the best case scenario.
It seems almost inevitable, Jason, don't you think? Because that's the thing, is if you're going to throw, if half, 20% of the people are thrown out of work for good, for their whole career option closes down. Imagine
more than 20%.
I'm just saying, if it even gets to that, I mean, beyond that, what I'm saying is becomes truer. But like, imagine being an accountant. No one's going to need services at all for any reason. If you're studying to be an architect, they're not going to need 75 architects to do a skyscraper. They're going to need 4 or 5 people to do it from now on. Like all of these job opportunities are just about to go, or just vanish completely into air.
Yeah, I briefly did a thing with Google about their artisan machine intelligence AI program, and I did a talk with them in London, and this was 2017. But I had a memory of being on the tube to my hotel, and there were two 18-year-old boys who were going off. They were talking about their future, and I was talking to them, and they said that they're studying they're both excited because they got into school for accounting. And so I said, I hate to break it to you, but I don't know if that's going to be the most stable job option in the future.
And that's
even creative jobs as well.
Well, think about it this way: it was previously the most stable job. That's the thing. You became an accountant,
right, or lawyer. I mean, you can use AI for law to reading contracts, things like that. I trust. Sometimes I trust like medical advice from. I shouldn't say that, but sometimes I do feel like I trust medical advice from AI more than talking to a human doctor. So
I feel you.
Yeah, I mean that's a terrible thing. I shouldn't say that, but
well, a lot of doctors are just dipshits. I mean, that's just a fact. I mean, you can't. I mean, I've been. I mean, especially with doctors who deal with women's problems. I mean, it's scandalous, in my opinion. Being married to somebody who's been down that horrible road. They don't even trust women. You know what I mean? I mean, think of all of these horrible things like endometriosis. That like 10 years ago, no one was discussing. They didn't even care about it. They were more interested in coming up with erection pills than they were reading, a persistent, horrible pain that was ruining women's lives. It took it 10 years for her to be diagnosed properly. 10. She was told it was in her mind.
Oh my God.
You know what I mean? So I mean that's so. So I feel you about doctors. I mean, I don't think it's terrible. I'm pro-vaccine. I just want to get that out there.
I know. It's just like.
But you can't find better stuff online.
But they wonder why people don't trust the medical system. I mean, I think that that's one thing everyone should agree on, that the medical system needs to be fixed in the U.S. That's one of its most glaring issues, and there's a lot of them.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing is you could go to a search engine like Perplexity or and ask about your ailment. And then take that information to your doctor. It sort of helps you narrow it down. Whatever the problems are, you could sort of maybe narrow it down a little faster in that way.
Yeah, I think that AI, it keeps getting better. And
shockingly fast.
I use it for almost everything now.
Yeah, me too.
So I think that there will be a leveling effect with it where, and not necessarily top down, but also bottom up, where a lot of people are going to lose jobs, but also it augments the ability of one person to do a tremendous amount of work.
Oh yeah, let there be
in an insane. Like I always I visualized it at first as like, you remember the Sigourney Weaver puts on the power loader in Aliens, which is like the forklift machine that she fights the alien with in the end. Do you remember what I'm talking about?
I don't, but
okay, well.
But I believe you.
But hopefully people listening will. But it's like putting on an additional suit that allows you to do such higher heavy lifting than you would normally. So it can unleash
an exoskeleton in that way that now you're a badass and can fight the villains.
Right, exactly. But yeah, so for any people who are willing to harness it, it allows you to be tremendously more productive and creative, I think, and punch at a very much higher weight than you would normally.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I find it's great with writing because you get a head start, and it will often give you some really good adjectives, adverbs to use in your writing, and that's kind of what separates a good writer from a bad writer is their adjectives and their adverbs, in my opinion. So, you get that with it, or also even something like Grammarly, which I was resistant to use, but now I'm using it all the time. It really that really does help you become a better writer because it forces you to be a clearer writer. You know what I mean? I think I have a sort of recursive sort of logic to the way that I write, and I'm much more straightforward when I use Grammarly.
Got it. Yeah, I have an issue about repeating the same word over and over again in a paragraph. It's just I think that's one of those things that either you adopt it or don't. That's an evolve or die scenario, and I find that it frees up a lot of creativity. So
fuck yeah. And it enhances it and frees up more time to get even better at what you're doing or to do other things. Sure it is.
Yeah,
Why not?
and it takes a lot of stress off me of just doing tedious work also. And I think that the positive upside of that is that people will use AI. Okay, it's like we can think about losing jobs, but also what can they use AI to create? I mean, just about anything.
Mhm.
I mean, we're going to see a complete restructuring and reorganizing of society and how people view work and what it is. And we're still running off, as I know you've thought a lot about, the old factory model, which doesn't make sense at all anymore.
It doesn't make any sense at all. I mean, the weird thing is I mean, I've always sort of basically looked at the world as, through the lens of, Marxism, historical, dialectical materialism. That's the way that I've see it, that history doesn't seem to unfold in certain ways. But I mean, is this the future that Marx foresaw ultimately? Is this the post-industrial? I mean, it's almost more, I don't want to say Aldous Huxley, but it's so much more futuristic to think that there's this technology that's going to make all of these jobs vanish, and then people are, because people are obviously, if you don't have an income anymore or any really possibility of having an income, and if the game of musical chairs has left so few chairs for so many people, those people are not just going to lay down in the fucking street and die. They're going to have to be fed and clothed and sheltered, or there's going to be bad things that will happen in the world. So they know that. They know that. So I mean, it seems to me that there has to be some kind of preparation for this now. And if there's not, for God's sake, I'd much rather have a Democratic House, Senate, and White House than a Republican one, because that would just be a fucking disaster. Mm-hmm. You can't just make something like that. You can't just say, well, pull it up by your bootstraps. It's not possible. It's not going to be possible anymore. There's no choice in the matter.
Yeah,
some variety of guaranteed income is going to happen, period. It has to.
Yeah, there's just, when you look at all the rioting that's been happening, and then I think the trucker protest in Canada, it's kind of a preview of the type of unrest that could happen.
Mm-hmm.
Particularly being that trucking is going to go really to AI trucks, very quickly.
And do you know what the number one job is in every state, in every county, in every city in the world? Yeah, that's right.
Trucking.
By far, that is the number one job, and it is going to go away.
Right. In my more cynical moments, I was wondering if some of the COVID lockdowns were preparing people for that level of social control. I don't think that, but I'm wondering about what it's going to take for society to cope with that. And I hate to think this, but my guess is there's not a plan.
Oh, I don't think there's a plan yet. I think some people are starting to figure it out, and hopefully the ones who are looking at a more enlightened future for what is money? It's that whole thing. They're going to have to completely redefine what money is. What is this? What is this exchange mechanism? It doesn't. It's not paper anymore. I think money to me is an absurd topic all around.
Right.
But if it is a digital thing that is not tied to the value of gold or anything else, like it's a sort of a basket of certain commodities, what is it? If it's digital, what is it? It's like, it's not a gold coin anymore.
Right.
Digital. So therefore it's nothing. You can't hold it in your hand. It doesn't weigh anything. It's invisible. Why can't they just make more of it? I mean, ultimately that is what they do anyways. You know what I mean? Like, oh, let's coin a new $15 trillion gold coin and we can go and spend that money now. I mean, it's already an absurdity when you think about it. This country is able to get away with it as long as we have, because we control the world's number one currency. We can print as much as we want, and everybody else sort of pays for that pain,
Yeah, and the world's becoming more multipolar, and I think the guarantor of the U.S. financial system is military superiority, and now things are starting to get a little closer. So
that's exactly it. Without the U.S. military, all of the things that happened after World War II wouldn't have happened. It would have happened. The history would be a lot different if it wasn't for the Americans making trade safe. I think that's how they got other countries to join into these ideas. It was like, okay, we're gonna there's not going to be pirates in sea anymore. We're going to take all of this shit. you can trade. It'll be free trade.
Yeah, and I think you can probably see pretty clearly that, you mentioned America, the world being the way it was after World War II because of America. Well, America going away, it's going to go right back to that. I think you can see fairly clearly just in the way how populist people are, the amount of violence happening. I mean, it'll go straight back to that same fight
In what sense?
without America.
What, in other countries?
I think if without American oversight, it's like the thing that has largely been keeping the world at peace is the U.S.
Well, no, I think that's true because again,
Right.
it's
So without it, it will go. It will go back.
We will protect your exchange and the movement of goods for you if you join our system instead of that system. That was the simple. I think that was the equation. That was the offer to the world for 70 years, and that is not something that I don't think that is going to go on for very much longer because I don't think it's necessarily in the interest of the people who run this country to continue to do that.
Right, and I'm agreeing.
Very expensive.
Yeah, I'm agreeing, and basically what I'm saying is, if you look at things like Ukraine, the invasion of Ukraine, that shows where the world will go straight back to.
I see what you're saying. Oh yeah, no, absolutely. That's what
I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah, no, yeah.
That's just straight up. That's a World War II battle happening again.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is, who thought there would be another war in Europe?
Right.
It's a scary thing. It's a really scary thing.
Yeah.
No, I agree with what you're saying.
Yeah, so I think it really is a good time to be magically connected, particularly because you see people using using all this stuff every day on the other side.
Advertising,
Russia,
but marketing and advertising.
Yeah, absolutely. But particularly when you're mentioning Russia and black magic and action from a distance, it's a good time to be connected. And one thing that I was going to mention that I thought about a best possible future outcome with universal basic income is people are going to have a lot of free time. So there's going to be a huge upswing of interest in magic and spirituality in general. Because if you have Crowley talks about at one point that, he's only writing about magic because the world has made it possible for a few more people to have the leisure time to undertake the great work. I mean, if you look at the classic thing with him is you always imagine that you had to have this huge hammer horror set up and all these things. And not just that, but that you were independently wealthy enough to have the free time to meditate or read this stuff. So it was always for a tiny, tiny group of people. Now, in the last 10 years, I've only seen a huge explosion of interest in this topic. And I think with universal basic income and the more people's time is freed up, there'll be more and more.
There's also going to be more TikTok videos.
Well, right. So I'm saying most positive, hopeful.
Yeah. I mean, I think I would say that what the social, the way that society is about to restructure itself is unknown. I mean, if you look at all of the changes that have happened just in the political landscape in the past 3 weeks, I think we're going to see those kind of shifts over and over and over again for years. I think it'll be an extremely turbulent time, even if things are nominally progressive and moving in that direction. I think there's still going to be a lot of turbulence. The AI thing is going to be, I mean, it's going to affect everybody.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, the future is unknown. I mean, I every time I've ever tried to predict something, I've always been wrong. Every time. I'm the worst prognosticator in the world. If I think something is going to happen, believe me, it won't.
Well, things like you said, things change every 24 hours now.
Mm-hmm.
Like not just the news cycle. It's like everything changed, at least in the last 3 weeks. Everything changes every 24-hour period. It's like enough to make anybody dizzy. So it's amazing that people are keeping as calm as they are.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's like Terence McKenna's Time Wave Zero when it starts to really go crazy at the end.
Yeah.
What I mean? Like maybe he was. I mean, you would look at it now. I always think like, oh, this is the time of high novelty. And it's been that way for a while, hasn't it?
Yeah, it keeps getting more and more insane.
I mean, Terrence died right before it really started to get nuts. To get right down to it.
Yeah. It's gotten insane. It's like I saw somebody made the remark on Twitter. It's like the Trump assassination attempt was, I think, under 3 weeks ago,
I know it feels like it was forever ago,
and it
doesn't it?
feels like 3 years ago. It's like,
Well, I was listening to a podcast this morning when I was driving to the post office, and it was Anthony Scaramucci was on, and
yeah,
he was talking about how that 3 weeks ago he was saying to this woman on another podcast that oh, it's over. He got that iconic picture of him with his he won, and that was 3 weeks ago.
yeah. It'll be interesting. Interesting 3 months though. It'll be interesting to see how whichever
Fuck
side
yeah.
loses reacts.
It's going to be brutal. It's
Yeah,
going to be
more
brutal.
reasons not to leave the house.
Yeah, good ones. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it was 2020. I was in Glendale in 2020 during the mail-in election, and just like everything was on fire. It was just insane. It was just totally, completely insane.
That must have felt quite apocalyptic.
It was in Glen. I think at a certain point, the center of COVID in the U.S. was in L.A., and the center of COVID in L.A. was in Glendale. So it was ground zero for whatever reason. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
we did an interview.
We did it.
Yeah, it's good to see you.
And you. What did you shave your head because you are balding, or just want to shave
Yes, I'm balding now. Yeah.
your? Oh well,
Yeah,
it's good on you. Fine.
Oh, thanks.
So, I mean,
Yeah,
if I
getting
shaved
older.
my head, it would be horrible. I have my mother laid me without a skull cap, like on the so my back of my head is like flat. So like I never shaved my head. I did my father had all of his hair when he died, so I probably will too. I look just
Yeah.
like him.
Very good. Yeah, the bleached look looks good on you.
The bleach look. Oh, this?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not bleach. I'll tell you that much. Yeah.
Okay, well, it looks good.
No thanks. Yeah, but that's the thing is when your hair gets this gray, you have to really stay out of the sun because you come in if imagine my face was really red, I would look like either like Santa Claus or like a skinny Santa Claus or like Hemingway. You know what I mean? That kind of ruddy. Like I don't want to look that way. That would just be like
Okay.
I'll be like a Malibu grandfather.
Yeah.
I don't want that. So I have to stay out of the sun.
Okay. All right. Well, so when does the Kickstarter ends in 10 days, and then what happens with the show then?
Then it's going to get edited. Then it's going to be edited. The guy who shot it is also the editor, Eric Middleman, who's been a friend of mine for 30 years. So he was not only the guy who was there when these interviews were being done, but we're also putting it together. So he has a deep institutional knowledge of those 50 hours, which comes in handy, But when I work on something like this, I tend to I'll walk around with headphones on, or I'll walk the dog with headphones on and listen to the interview tapes over and over and over again. And certain things will start to come out, sort of rise to the top. That it works. I'm also working with transcripts, of course, but I tend to listen to things over and over and over again. And the way that I'm trying to structure this now is to structure it like one of these oral histories like Edie or Please Kill Me, where it's like one person tells a paragraph and then the next person and then the next person.
Okay.
There's a narrative. It comes that way, or the thesis is explained that way. So it's that. It's just to get it done. And then I'm going to hopefully shoot like host apps like stand-ups, like the Rod Serling or Alfred Hitchcock.
Great. Okay.
At the PRS, at the Philosophical Research Society.
That's great. That's great.
They're open to it. They've been very supportive. There's going to actually be a witchathon, not this Sunday, but the Sunday following, where sponsored through PRS and through Jessica Hunley and Library of Esoterica. And it's really generous of them to do this. There's going to be like a live event. It'll be online, and it will be me and many of the witches who were interviewed in the show. And it will be a conversation and a telethon to try to drum up Kickstarter donations.
So if people want to donate, where should they go?
Magickshow.net will get them there. Magic with a K. Magickshow.net will get them right there.
All right. Well, I guess we should wrap it there. Thank you for doing it.
Oh yeah, a lot of fun. Good seeing you.
Yeah, you too.